Hey there friends, it's Missy again. Thanks so much for stopping in today. This layout is for the Pinkfresh Studio and Altenew June 2020 collaboration blog hop, and there are tons of inspirational layouts and prizes to be won, and all of the designers are coming together to create projects with this gorgeous new collection designed for this specific blog hop. It's by Pinkfresh Studio and Altenew, and if you look at the papers you can kind of see both styles included, and it's a lot of florals. I'm going to kind of flip through the papers here. There's lots of pinks, there's some grays, some of the flowers are outlined in black, there's some papers with watercolor type images, florals and leaves, and then you have some like this with the pink with the really pretty gray floral images. So all kinds of pretty things here, and so I'm gonna make a layout with some mixed media using these goodies. There are the papers that I just showed you, and then there is a pack of die cuts, and then there are also some stamp sets. This stamp set, which I do use, is called Celebrate Us, because the name of the collection is Celebrate. I don't even know if I said that, but so everything is designed to coordinate. These are some dies called Celebrate Us die, and then this stamp and die set is called Celebrate Today. So you get a really cool die to match that big floral stamp. So I want to use this beautiful ombre pink to orange paper and combine it with this gorgeous watercolor floral paper. It's this giant, you can see there it takes up almost an entire paper, but I also love the back with that wreath. The collection contains 2 of each papers, so I'm going to use this side for this layout, and then I'm going to use the wreath for something else. So I was thinking I would have pretty much just half of this big image here kind of peeking out of the ombre paper. So I'm going to take some time and just basically fussy cut half of it, because the other half is going to be hidden. You can kind of see there what I'm talking about. I've got it pretty much done, and I want to have white as my main background, but I want to have like a big crooked strip of this paper. So I'm going to just tear a chunk off of the left side and then place that on the left side of the white paper, and then kind of play around with placement here. I don't want the entire big floral design to show, because it is pretty big, as you can see, and it takes up a lot of space, and I didn't want the layout to be so busy that I don't really have a place to put my photo, or that it would compete with all of these flowers and leaves. So I only want a little bit of it showing, and it still makes a big statement once it's all said and done. This is what I would call a big statement piece. And even though only about half of it is going to be visible, it's still going to make a big impact on the layout. So I'm going to put all that aside and get to work on my background, and I'm using some textured white cardstock here, and this is going to change. I'm just going to go ahead and let you know this is going to change, but this was my initial thought, and I wanted to leave this in here just to show you how things go. So I've got basically all the white space covered with gesso, and I wanted to repeat the process that I did on my previous layout for Pinkfresh Studio, where I stamped down some images and then used my watercolor brush to kind of blur some of the lines. So I pulled out the big floral lined stamp from the Celebrate Us stamp set, and I'm using the little mini ink cubes from Pinkfresh Studio, and I used the color called Regal Kiss, which is a deep purple that's going to match some of the flowers in that big image. But something about this specific color, when I use it with gesso and then activate it with water, it completely turns a different color. It's so weird, because the blue colors did not do that when I used the blue shades on my previous layout. It's just this one purple shade. I don't know if it's a mixture of the what they used to make this exact color, But watch what happens. You're going to see this go down here. I wanted some of these stamped images kind of peeking out to the side of the big image. The color that I used down below on that one there is called Coral Reef, and it worked great. But the more the Regal Kiss dried, it turned fluorescent pink. You can see there I just did a little bit on the part of the paper with no gesso, and look at the difference in the color. You know, I have to use gesso if I'm going to do this blending technique, because otherwise it's going to look like that big purple smudge. If you just stamp it directly onto cardstock, you know, the lines are not going to bleed. You're going to add water and nothing is really going to happen except a hole in your paper. And so I was just baffled at why, when this purple color hits gesso and then I add water to it, it turns fluorescent pink. So I thought that I would put another layer of the stamp on top of it and darken it up, and then, you know, just keep adding layers of the same color and see what happens. And it's just very interesting why some colors change color and others don't. So obviously I do not want fluorescent pink on this layout because I'm not really a neon fan, and there's no neon in this collection by far. So then I decided to just smudge some of the paint on my stamping block there, and then just dab some of the color on my brush and cover it up and see if that helped to change the color of it. Because I did want it to look like a watercolor, but I still wanted to be able to see some of the lines of the flower. If you saw my previous layout, you understand what I'm talking about with this technique. And it just was not working. I don't know. I didn't like it. I didn't like that look at that color. Look at that pink. That's not the color. I mean, it's supposed to be dark purple, but something about the gesso and the water, I don't know. It just messes with the concentration of the color. So I changed my mind. I said, okay, we're not going to use white cardstock for this. I'm going to pull another sheet of the pattern paper from the collection. So I pulled out this one that's mostly white in the middle, but then around the edges, it's got these little paintbrush stroke edges. And so we're going to use that instead and just try to take a different route and see what happens. Yeah, I don't know what was going on, but if you look at the floral clusters, there's clearly no fluorescent in there. But there's some really unique colors. There's like that deep blush color and almost a brown color. And I'm really usually not a brown fan, but I like how it looks mixed with these deep pinks and the blush colors. And then when it's mixed with this paper, I think it just looks so pretty. And so we're going to try this and see what happens. Okay, so now you can see what I'm talking about with having just half of this floral image visible. It's still pretty busy. There's still a lot going on. And so I like that I have pretty much a solid paper covering it up top. I would consider that ombre paper more of a solid. So here's what I decided to do. I'm going to go back to those ink colors. I've got the Regal Kiss again, the Coral Reef, and I'm going to kind of mix those together and just lightly add some splatters. Now, I don't have any gesso. I'm not going to do the gesso thing again, because it's going to change color. I already know that. Something about the gesso does not like Regal Kiss when I mix it with water. Now, I've never stamped it on gesso and not added water, because I don't feel like if you're not going to add water, you don't need gesso. So I'm just going to splatter, and right away, you know, when these splatters hit this pattern paper, they soak right through. And so there is going to be no smudging, no blending. The way these splatters land is the way they land. You know, you can't change it. They're pretty permanent. So I wanted just to have a little bit of splattering going on. So I'm using, like I said, the Regal Kiss and the Coral Reef. And I like how that turned out. It's subtle, but it's got the right color. It matches, and then the colors did not change. So the colors are going to stay the same. I'm going to use these cute pictures of my daughter from several years ago, and I printed 3 on a 4x6 paper or photo paper. And sometimes I'll cut these up and arrange them all over the page, but sometimes I leave them in the strip like this. So I'm going to leave these as basically one big long photo. And I'm going to put a little bit of white tissue paper behind it, as well as some adhesive foam. And then my pictures I felt like would look good right there, kind of above the floral cluster on top of the solid. And then I wanted to not waste some of these other flowers from the other half, so I'm going to fussy cut out the couple of the larger ones to use as layers up top behind the photo. And you know, nothing is permanent here. I'm just experimenting and playing around with placement of everything. I did glue down the background. The background is done, but yeah, I wanted the photos to be separate from the photo cluster. You can see what I'm talking about, how it's so busy. If you were to put a very colorful photo on top of this big floral image, it might get lost because everything's so busy. But since I'm putting the photos on the solid part, they stand out a little bit more. Okay, so here's where I got a little bit daring. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I would add a little bit of color without gesso. Not good. It soaks right through the paper. And yeah, there's not much blending or smudging going on. You can't really change the color of this. I don't know. I don't know why I did this. Yeah, I was trying to, you see I'm pointing at the screen like you can see me. You can't see my hand. Where the first photo is, right under the first photo to the left there's a little sprig of that purple color. That was kind of the color I was trying to add over here. So now what am I doing? I'm trying to cover it up with white gesso. Yeah, I shouldn't even have done that. But you live and you learn, and sometimes you do things and you tell yourself, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? You're just going to mess it up. But you know, you still do it anyway. That's what I'm doing here. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if this can be salvaged. I was getting very frustrated because I wanted the color that I wanted, and it would not happen. So I was getting stressed out. So I put that away. I wanted to do some more stamping. Okay, so I kind of do the same technique that I did on my layout last week. So what I did was I pulled out the stamp set again, and we're not going to stamp it onto the background. We're going to stamp it onto separate cardstock and then cut it out and try to use it that way, because I wanted these stamped images on this layout, dagnabbit. They're gonna be on there. I wanted them on there. So I'm going back to the colors, the Regal Kiss and the Coral Reef, and I'm gonna stamp them. Now, this white cardstock I'm using has clear gesso on it already. So I'm taking another risk here, and what I thought I would do was just very, very lightly start to kind of color in some shadowing effects here. I'm adding just a tiny bit of water, basically just enough to kind of blend in some shadows. I'm using my water brush. I'm barely squeezing it, so just a smidgen of water is coming out. And this worked out a lot better. I don't know what the difference was, because it's the same cardstock with the same gesso, the same stamp, the same water, and the same inks, but it did not turn fluorescent this time. I don't know if there was magic in the air this day or what was happening, but this looks much better. Maybe it's because I didn't use a lot of water. Maybe it's because I was saying bad words in my head or out loud. I don't know, but this experience calmed me down because it was actually working and things were the color that they should be. The Coral Reef one was great. It did not really change color. I kept working at them, and then I cut them out. I didn't think you wanted to see me fussy cutting these out. They turned out okay. They turned out okay. So what I wanted to do was layer these floral clusters kind of underneath the big floral cluster, so you can kind of see the leaves and a bit of the flower petals kind of peeking out. And I like the way that looks. It does kind of contribute to the busy factor of the flowers, but I think it's still pretty and I like how it looks. So we're gonna go with it. I was just happy that the colors were the way I wanted them to be. No magic fluorescent pink showed up, so that was good. So I can't believe that I have this color of thread, because it is really not my color. It's that darkish brownish orangey color. However, like I said, it looks beautiful mixed with these colors, and for some reason I have that color thread. This probably doesn't come as a surprise, but I'm going to layer some of that color underneath the bottom part here, because I've got a lot of pink, I've got a lot of purple. I didn't want any more green. I felt like there was sufficient amount of green with the leaves, so I thought I'm going to pull in that brown color and kind of echo that in a subtle way. And so the thread is a great way to do that. The thread adds texture, it adds little pops of color. So that is what I did there. I'm going to make sure my pictures are straight before I glue them down. And then when I smudge them down or press down, of course they moved, so I had to remeasure them. Everything else on this layout is crooked, but I want my photos straight for whatever reason. I'm going to try to layer in some more of the flowers that I cut and work in a couple of the die cuts. This is a floral frame from the die cut pack. I'm going to use that not as a frame, but as layers on the sides of the photos. So, you know, just because you have a frame in your collection or you know, chipboard paper, whatever it is, you do not have to use it as a frame. I didn't use it as a frame. You can cut it and use it as a layer. So, you know, always look at your shapes and your images and your products. And if you are confused about, you know, am I ever going to use this? Because I'm not a big frame person. I hardly ever frame my photos. You do not have to use it as a frame. Use it for something else. So don't be afraid to cut something up and use it in a different way. Now, I did not have that perfect shade of purple thread. So what I did was I mixed two different colors together, and it kind of created the purple that I was going for. So I pulled out some darker purple and then some really rich, deep pink. And I'm going to layer this right underneath the little torn edge there under the photos. Speaking of that brown color, I liked it, or I like it, but there was like a big chunk of it right there. So I wanted to add some of that purple color just to sort of break it up. So that's what I did there with the thread. And I'm trying to figure out where to put this brownish flower. And I wanted to use a couple of the word die cuts. They have one that says happy, one that says hello, and one that says love, and they're all different colors. So just trying to play around with a couple of those. And I'm also trying to play around with creating a cluster down at the bottom, because I had one stamped flower that I watercolored left over, and then I think I'm going to use it down at the bottom with that brown and white flower that I cut. And I think I decided to use the love die cut right there on top of the photos, just because I liked how it looked right there. And I'm going to glue down all that thread and make sure it stays. And I'm going to come back with the thread, the two pinks, or the purple and the pink that I mixed together, because I want to pull in some of that color down at the bottom in that cluster. So I'm going to mix that up, and then, yeah, it was a big old tangled mess. But at this point, yeah, I was just stressed out because things were, you know, not going according to plan, but that's okay. Always need a plan B. When the image in your mind, you start to make it and you're thinking, yeah, this is not going to work. I need a plan B. So sometimes plan B is better, sometimes it isn't. I think in this case it worked out great because I was definitely happy with how it turned out. Okay, so at this point I took a break, I came back, and when I looked at the layout, I thought, I can't really tell the difference between the big floral cluster and the stamped flowers that I tucked underneath. They kind of blend together and it just looks like a blob of color. So what I wanted to do was kind of separate the stamped images from the floral cluster. So I'm using a little bit of white acrylic paint and kind of just smudging out a little bit of the stamped images underneath where they separate from the cluster, just to kind of white that out. And this is just going to help separate them a little bit and make both things stand out. Because I want the stamped images to be visible. Granted, they are subtle because they're not the main thing that you see. The main thing you see is that big floral dot, or the big floral piece. But when you start to look at it closely, you can see how they're, I hope that makes sense. I hope you can tell the difference when I added that white paint there. It just kind of helps both things stand out, the big floral cluster and the die cuts. And then I thought, we got the white paint out, let's splatter up top, because I love white splatters on colored backgrounds. And I just think it's just a fun, subtle thing to do. It's great for making snow. It's great for making bubbles, all kinds of things. But in this case, I just liked the way it looked. So I think now everything stands out on its own a little bit better. I'm going to work on the smaller pieces here. And I was trying to figure out if I wanted to just use that little love die cut as my main title, but I wanted to add something a little more. So I'm going to do that here shortly. I'm going to glue down the cluster down at the bottom. And I like that there's white space on the background on the bottom. You know, underneath the floral cluster and before you get to the bottom of the page, it's white. So that helps break up the busyness of the page, I think. You've got like the solid color at the top, even though it's orange to pink. That helps the photos to stand out. And then right under the photos, you've got this busy, beautiful floral situation. And then you've got another big chunk of white space. And then you've got another floral cluster. So it kind of alternates, you know, quiet, busy, if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head. It's just good to break up the busy factor, I think. It helps to make everything that you want to stand out, it helps it to stand out. Okay, so this is another of the die cuts. It's a floral. It's like a really pretty pink. I cut half of it, and I want to use half of it kind of underneath the cluster at the bottom, and then I want to use half of it kind of underneath the word love. Again, just kind of breaking up the colors up there because I felt like there was a lot of just solid brown right under where the paper is torn. So that's why I added in the thread, and that's why I added in another flower die cut that was pink. So I'm going to pull out some white thickers. Now these are not part of this collection. These are from the Pinkfresh Studio Just a Little Lovely collection. And this is also going to help break up some of the brown. I'm going to go very, very simple. Love Her. Very short. It fits perfect. And I love these puffy alpha stickers because they're white. And I like them right there because they help brighten up that brown color. You can still see the brown color, which I think is pretty. But the white letters just sort of make it stand out a little bit more. They help break it up, kind of like the white space at the bottom. I'm using a couple of phrase stamps from the Celebrate Today stamp set, just right under the photos there. One says Good Times and one says Everyday Moments. And then I'm going to draw some lines with my T-square ruler down here on the bottom right and use my black fine tip Sharpie for journaling. And I do come back and add the date. And that's it. That's the final layout. I really do love how this turned out. It was a challenge to get my background going. But, oh yeah, I totally forgot to mention that I turned the layout because it originally was going to be vertical. But, you know, it's horizontal now. And I like how it turned out. Here you can see up close all the details. I know sometimes it's hard to see from far away when I'm filming. That's why I put so many close-up shots in here. But I love how the stamped images turned out. I love that big floral paper. I think it's so pretty. I love the pinks and the soft oranges. And oh, if you're a flower fan and a Pinkfresh Studio fan and an Altenew fan, you're going to want this collection because it is really pretty. And all kinds of inspiration today. I'm going to link all the links that you need to get started on the blog hop down below. There's prizes galore, inspiration galore. So definitely check it all out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.